I have worked in the environment sector now essentially since I left university. My degree is actually in history. I have no biological or ecological training whatsoever. I think the highest my qualifications go is something called a double award science, which is something they were doling out 20 years ago when it comes to actual biology. So I have approached this far more from a human centric view. And I've done a number of jobs in the environment sector as a consequence. But yeah, my background is mostly in writing and connecting people with nature. So I believe very firmly that a wildlife is a happier and healthier life, and it's something that I've always championed throughout my entire career. We can all benefit from time spent in nature, and that is something that improves our physical health and our mental health, and can improve the lives of children, the elderly, and all sorts of different people who approach nature in different ways and experience it in different ways. There is no correct way to enjoy the natural world. There are lots of incorrect ways to enjoy it, but there is no correct way to do it. It is a personal connection that means something to you. I'm a wildlife storyteller. So this means that I write books, I do talks, I go to events sometimes. I have worked as a content creator for a number of different organizations, including the National Wildlife Trusts, all the way through to the tiny Isles of Scilly Wildlife Trust, which is the smallest wildlife trust in the UK. And I currently work for Mark Constantine, who is the CEO of Lush Cosmetics. And I essentially work personally for him on one of his personal projects, which is all to do with bird sound. And I am the comms person for that, which involves a lot of writing, a lot of editing, generally trying to translate very technical scientific bird sound into something that is more palatable for the masses because it is complicated science we're talking about. So we want to make it accessible for everybody. I do love to bring people of all ages close to nature, but my background is very much working with children and young people. I have a daughter who is pictured here, but she is actually now 7 years old and nowhere near as cute and cuddly. She loudly pronounces, I hate birds on a regular basis, but luckily she's only saying that to wind me up. Um, She's actually quite connected with nature. She's known as the nature kid in her class, which I kind of feel sorry for her for. But bringing her close to nature and bringing other young people right through from being little kids to teenagers and people in their early 20s, that has been something that I have been involved with for many years. And my first job out of university was setting up an organization that connected young conservationists to the professional conservation movement and helped to secure their jobs. I've worked in the conservation sector for about 14 years now, which is really depressing, actually. There is a horrible moment in your career where you recognize that you no longer represent the young voice of that industry. You are well and firmly in the middle era, unfortunately, which can largely mean irrelevance, but also the fact that you no longer know how young people speak, act, dress, talk, behave. And that has, luckily, my 7-year-old daughter has helped me with some of that. Um, so yes, it's been a very varied career. I've done lots of different areas of wildlife conservation, but all based in the UK, just at different levels of organisation. Some of it PAYE, where I've been salaried, and lots of it freelance as well. Um, a huge part of what I have done is all to do with random acts of wildness. So when I was working for the wildlife trusts, we came up with a campaign called 30 Days Wild, and I was really privileged to run that campaign for the first 5 years that it existed. This campaign is up there with things like the Garden Birdwatch that the RSPB do. And 30 Days Wild has now had something like 2 million people take part across the UK. And essentially, it's a really easy campaign. Do something wild every day for 30 days throughout June. Really simple, can be loads of different activities, can be really entry level, can be really technical, depending on what you're into. And we sent people a lovely pack that had a calendar in it and had like inspiration cards and so on and badges to get people involved. We did a schools pack, we did a corporate pack. And yeah, I was involved in the first 5 years of that and essentially responsible for running it. Off the back of that, I ended up writing a book called 365 Days Wild because everyone was doing this amazing campaign for 30 days. And then we got inundated on the 1st of July with people saying, but we don't want to stop, we want to keep going. And actually, June's a really easy nature to connect, a really easy month to connect with nature. And then you kind of get through to the autumn and it's a bit rubbish and cold and wet and drizzly. So this book has 365 different ideas to connect with nature across a whole range of subjects. And so I'm going to be introducing you to some of these themes as we talk and some of the things that you can do to help connect people with nature in your own lives, no matter what your role is in their lives. So it could be for community leaders, like brownie leaders or scout leaders, teachers, and so on. Or it could just be getting your kids and grandkids out there as well, and also yourself. There's some things in here that are strictly for the over 18s as well. So there's all these different ideas to basically connect you and the people around you with nature. Like I said, I've got a little girl, and my biggest influence at the moment appears to be in the school PTA, which is something that no one tells you about when you have kids, that you're going to get sucked into this unholy world of school PTAism. But that is another area where I try and exert some influence for environmental and ecological values. So it's not just about what's good for nature. Um, there is lots of studies out there now that didn't really exist 15 years ago, but now they're really common, that basically prove that being connected with nature is actually good for your mental and your physical health. As part of 30 Days Wild, the campaign, we did some research with the University of Derby, and we helped prove, as part of a scientific study, that one random act of wildness every day for 30 days will lead to an improvement in your health. And the amount of people reporting their health as excellent increased by 30% over those 30 days. That didn't just last for the first 30 days, that actually lasted for 2 months after the activity had taken place, because people got into that habit of repeatedly doing things. And you see this all the time in marketing campaigns across all different areas now. So, for example, things like Dry January or Stoptober, things like that, where they're asking you to do something every day over the course of a month, will in theory lead to actual behavior change. So I'm a big proponent of this month-long kind of campaign. You see it all the time running and so on as well. Run for 2 miles a day and you'll end up running far further at the end of it, and you'll keep doing it. So that's a really good benchmark if you're trying to connect people with nature yourself. Get them doing it habitually. These one-off flashpoints where you do like one thing in January and then you don't think about it till March, that's not going to lead to behavior change. It's all about doing it repeatedly. We also looked at volunteering projects, so where people go and actively get involved with a local nature organisation. And after 6 weeks, we can already see a huge improvement with people and their mental health. So 95% of people in one particular study in 2017 reporting an improvement in their mental health from going out and doing something every week. That brings social benefits, so you're connecting with other people. It brings the benefit of being out in a green space with lots of oxygen, brings the benefits of increased exercise, but also you get benefits from understanding more about nature and the world around you as well. So there's lots of different things firing off here, and it is really exciting actually to be involved in this area of work. The way I view random acts of wildness is that they are mini adventures. I like to take my own daughter on adventures, although we never admit we're bird watching. That's not going to go down well. But we will go out into fun, wild places where we can explore nature, where we can learn about nature, or we can take action for nature. And like I said, she's got this little reputation now of being the nature person. And while she may say to me, no, Mum, that's not cool. I'm not interested. It's not K-pop Demon Hunters. It's not Wednesday. I'm not interested. She actually is absorbing it. She's taking it in. And I know that she went into school the other day and was very excitedly telling lots of people about a starling murmuration that we'd seen actually happening near the school. So kids especially are absorbing this, even if they are resistant to what they're telling you. They are actually taking it in. And I think a lot has changed in the past couple of decades in the way that we perceive nature. If I hear one more celebrity say, oh, yes, I'm into bird watching as well, I might cry, because it's become a bit of a buzzword, a bit of a sexy thing that celebrities like to say they're into. Very often they're not. but it's the new cool thing to do, so we might as well make the most of that bandwagon. So let's go on an adventure very much, and I'm going to help you do that in your local environment. But first, I'd like to do a little quick fire quiz, which, because I can only see a very small amount of you in the corner, I might ask Ant to look at in more detail. I'm going to apologize up front for the icons that PowerPoint AI has assigned to these questions. I really enjoyed the peacock and the sea lion, though, so I didn't bother to change them because I thought they were fun. So yes, either in your own head or on a piece of paper nearby, we have some questions. So the first one, what is thought to be the most common breeding bird in the UK? We'll do the answers after I've gone through the whole slide. The second question, which bird was voted the most popular bird in the UK? Next question, how many species of butterfly are there in the UK? Number four is what tree leaf is the symbol of the National Trust and the Woodland Trust? And number five, how many species of seal are there in the UK? From a personal perspective, I think that it's really important to remember how much exciting wildlife there is right on your doorstep. It's really easy to say, oh no, you've got to go abroad, you've got to go on expensive holidays, you've got to go traveling if you're going to see really cool wildlife. And actually, you don't really need to. There's an awful lot on your doorstep, and actually connecting people with nature right there is going to be far more beneficial to the local environment and to them than saying, "Oh, you have to be into lions and zebras and wildlife in the Amazon and wildlife in Australia." It's all about really what you can find on your doorstep, and people are only going to work to protect the wildlife that's on their doorstep if they know what's there. So let's have a look at the answers. So the most common breeding bird is in fact the wren. That has, I think, 8 million pairs or so. It is incredibly common. You tend to hear them before you see them. They are very loud and obnoxious, um, but very wonderful at the same time. For their size, they are one of the smallest birds in the UK, often get the title of being the smallest, but they're not actually. That kind of goes to goldcrests and firecrests. But they are incredibly loud, incredibly brash, and if you upset them in the breeding period, you will know about it. They will tell you off. The second one, obviously not peacock, but the most popular bird in the UK is, of course, the robin. And what else can you say? It is the symbol of Christmas, of course. But what a lot of people don't know about robins are actually very controversial birds. They are not pair faithful. They are very up for running off with the neighbor whenever the opportunity arises. A lot of them are migratory, so we have a tendency to think of our robin as being the robin that will come back to our garden every single day. Actually, a lot of them are migrating during migratory season. And we also have a tendency to think of them as being very close to humans because they make the most of garden food and feeding and so on. And you can quite often feed robins by hand. Actually, they're just manipulating us. They know where their bread is buttered very much, and they will form relationships with people, but their lives only are about 2 years old. So actually, they're passing this behavior on to the robins around them. And quite often, you'll think, "Oh, it's my robin. It's been coming back for 5 years." It's probably not. It's probably a number of robins who have learnt that you're an easy source of food, but they really are quite marvelous. And again, have a beautiful song. Number of butterflies in the UK, surprisingly high. We have 57 species of breeding butterfly, plus two migratory ones, which are the painted lady and the clouded yellow, both of which you get a lot of on the Isles of Scilly, which is a hotspot for migrant butterflies, whales, birds, everything. The oak is the tree that is the symbol of the Woodland Trust and the National Trust. And we have two species of seal, the harbour or common seal and the grey seal. But we do get a lot more popping up from time to time from the Arctic. For example, walruses, um, which we've had one or two of in the local area. We've had things like we've had things like bearded seals. I believe there's been ringed seals and all sorts, mostly in the north of Scotland, but you do get them all around the coast. So there's lots of different ways that we can connect with wildlife, and it's really important to remember that no matter where you are, there will be something that's special to your area, whether it's your garden birds, things like wrens and robins, whether it's butterflies that you don't get anywhere else. They are quite localized. You get different species in different places. We have these big, enormous species like oak trees that are symbolic of the whole of the UK. And then don't ever forget about the sea, because the sea around the UK is one of the most biodiverse areas that we have. And it's really important to remember that life under the sea and how we influence and protect our marine environment. So, first things first, when you are going outside and connecting people with nature, what do you need? I would recommend a pair of binoculars, to be honest. It's really easy to kind of connect with nature without them, but you'd be amazed at how many species you can actually see with binoculars, and not just birds, also whales and dolphins, seals, insects, and also you can use them if you turn them upside down as magnifying glasses as well. And you can get a cheap pair for between 50 to £100, ranging all the way up to the mega expensive pairs that are £3,000 or £4,000. So depending on your budget, it's really worth checking that out. And also, if you're looking at buying them for a group or a community group, it's worth finding out if anywhere is willing to gift you en masse, a bit like we do with iPads at schools and so on. See if you can get a discount if you're buying them from somewhere, or even get a sponsorship from a company, because those binoculars are going to help you and the people you're trying to inspire. You see a lot of places using really cheap binoculars with kids. And I have to say, I think it's a bit of a turn off for the kids because they're so rubbish. I don't know if you ever tried using a poor pair of binoculars, but like you get out of a Christmas cracker and they hinder your experience of wildlife rather than enhance it. And then we wonder why kids don't want to use them. So I would say investing a little bit more is probably better. But there are lots of mid-range pairs that you can go for. Having a notebook and a pen, really easy way to connect with nature, whether that's using it to sketch, to make notes, to note down things like the weather, to note down firsts. So the first time you see something in a year is always really special. That idea of journaling. Make sure you've got proper clothing. This is where I fall apart because I'm always notoriously badly dressed when I go outside. I'm not very good at being outside in a lot of ways. Having proper clothing and making sure that kids don't get cold, hot chocolate in a thermos flask. But whatever you do, don't overdo it. There can be that slight thing that I've seen with a lot of parents where they are bundling the kids up so much and carrying such enormous bags out to go for quite basic walks. Actually, you're detracting from the spontaneity of the adventures you're going to have. So try not to overdo it, but having a few basic things to keep you comfortable, happy, and to allow you to connect with nature are going to be really good. The other thing that I would strongly recommend is your phone. Um, Phones are amazing now, and although I don't like relying on my phone when I'm out, using it to take photos, using it for identification purposes. So you can get apps now that will look at bird sound and they'll do basic bird ID. You can use Google Lens really successfully for a lot of insects and a lot of flowers. Um, those sorts of things I think are really helpful now. And you can also use it to save maps, look at Google Maps so you can't get lost and so on. So make sure your phone is there and it's got full battery, which is another party trick of mine. But if, for example, I'm out with my daughter and she's not really feeling it, I find that quite often actually giving her my phone and giving her a photo challenge will immediately reconnect her with what's going on. And she's straight away off and will sometimes even make little videos for herself where she's talking through what she's seeing. And it's a really good way to kind of uh, reinforce those experiences that they're having. Now, where are we going? That's obviously a difficult question. You can go as local or you can go as far as you want, depending on the kind of experience you're looking to have, and it entirely depends on where you live. Um, Living by the sea, you're obviously really lucky because you get a whole range of environments that are a bit different. If you live in a city, it's obviously, yeah, it's a different kettle of fish. You've got maybe woodlands, maybe a little green space, and you're sharing that space, importantly, with lots of other people as well. So how far you want to go really is up to you, but you're never more than a few miles in the UK from a green space. And getting to know your local area, getting to know what's available is really, really important. It's really easy to think, oh, I need to go to this really good nature reserve, but that's half an hour away. Essentially, all you're doing is putting up a barrier. The way that I personally started to explore my local spaces was actually through running, and learning what routes there were going up and down the canal. My local canal is now my patch, as it was. I love running up and down my canal. It's a really biodiverse area. I had no idea. I've seen loads of birds there. I've seen amazing mammals there, including a water shrew, which are very difficult to see. And I nearly trod on it, the poor thing. There's loads of different ways that once you get to know a certain patch, it becomes yours. You take ownership of it to a certain extent. So I really would recommend starting local. And then if you want to spread your wings further, by all means do. I do recommend contacting local wildlife trusts if you're taking groups out, because they will be able to advise you on everything from logistics like parking and whether there are toilets and so on, through to maybe assigning someone who can actually help those people have a great experience. So I would always say wildlife trusts are a great place to start. So yeah, finding your local patch. As you can see here, this photo is taken in London, and there's grey herons wandering around through the park and so on. Never underestimate the power of something like a local park or a local woodland, especially if you're going to start using all of your senses to experience it. It's not just about what you can see, but what you can hear, what you can smell, what you can feel, in some instances, what you can taste. Um, so yeah, don't feel like you have to go a long way. Nature on your doorstep is often the thing that will inspire you the most, especially if you're into campaigning as well. Nothing brings communities together like the threat of a housing development going up on a green space close to you. And knowing what's close by will really help you to connect with that area and also bring the rest of your community together as well. Looking at your time of year, another really important thing that you do have to do. What time of year is it, and what exactly are you looking for? Being aware of the limitations of what you might see and the expectations of what you might see, both really important. So in spring, wildflowers. I am sure everyone in this room in the past 2 or 3 weeks has had the joy of seeing snowdrops, maybe daffodils coming out, and it is just, we've survived, we made it. It's a really exciting prospect when we begin to see those wildflowers coming through, things like primroses, um, celandine is another one that comes through. Crocuses, which are planted largely, but they're still really great for invertebrates that are out at this time of year. And they just make us feel so special. And we begin to see insects coming out as well. And we had our first big cloud of mosquitoes in our garden today, which was a bit of a mixed bag, but at the same time, delighted that those insects have found a home in our home. But provided they just keep it to the garden and don't try and come in the house, we're fine. You then get migration. So birds are beginning to come back. I heard my first chiff chaff of the day today, singing a local patch. The really exciting that they're coming back. We'll begin to see things like sand martins arriving back in the next few weeks. They're on a long migration. Ospreys are another one. They come back early March. And some stuff will even be starting to breed by now if you've got any corvids like rooks or crows, owls, even some birds of prey. They will be starting to breed as well. So it's really easy to think, oh, spring doesn't really start until April. A lot of birds are already very active in the mating market. And you've also got the start of the dawn chorus as well. We had our first really good dawn chorus this morning, with what can only be described as the loudest blackbird I have ever heard singing outside of the window from 5 o'clock in the morning for an hour and a half, which was both delightful and deeply irritating. Um, as you go through into the summer, you can do things like exploring rock pools. That's kind of another way of connecting with nature. A lot of birds become a lot harder to see actually in the middle of summer because they're so busy feeding and getting ready to migrate again, or they're raising young. It actually becomes kind of harder to see anything that's moving about a bit more. It's the same with butterflies and so on. You get more species, but you might have to go to specific areas to see them. Things like rock pools are really good actually because they're so stationary and the weather's nice and so on. As we go into autumn, again, you've got different kinds of migrants. So you've got things that are turning up in the UK for the winter, so lots of finches, thrushes, and so on. It's also nice to spot colours, I think, in the autumn, like really trying to find your different fiery autumn colours and looking at things like seeds, so acorns, conkers, looking at fallen feathers is quite good. So I find autumn is the collector month where things that have fallen, you might want to examine, look at, collect, draw, find different ways to connect with. And then as we go into winter, which I have to say is my least favorite month, I'm not good in winter. When you've got less daylight hours, what are you looking for again? Well, again, you've got different kinds of birds, often in big flocks. That's where they come into themselves. So things like starling murmurations or big flocks of finches. You can get patterns in ice and so on. So making the most of those frosty mornings. What kind of things can we get kids involved with there? Well, looking at ice, looking at how snow has fallen, looking at different rain patterns and so on, and at trying not to let the bad weather hold us back, essentially. Try and get kids outside as much as possible, if nothing more for the vitamin D content, but also make the most of those wintry landscapes. It can be difficult in winter, but it will always be worth it. And what kind of things do we want to see? So essentially, I've just included some of my favorite photos here from different areas. I think ladybirds were probably the first way that my own daughter connected with nature. That was until 2 years ago when we moved house and um, we were entering hibernation and about 100 of them appeared out of the door on a particularly warm morning. And we had no idea they were there. And I have to say, we both got a little bit freaked out actually, because 100 ladybirds suddenly materializing out of the door into the house was a bit of a shock. But much of the time, they're wonderful. There's loads of different species of ladybirds as well. So it's always good to get kids counting the spots on them, checking what colors they are, because you never know, you might find something a bit more rare. Forget-me-nots, which will be coming out in the next month or so, they are my favorite wildflower. Absolutely love them. They're just so tiny and you get them in a range of colours. Certain times of year, looking for those baby birds, quite often through sound as well as through seeing them. So things like ducklings and cygnets and goslings are easy to see, but also listening in the hedgerows for really high-pitched squeaking noises. And they're probably baby birds soliciting their parents to come back with food. And my favorite bird of all time is the swift. Absolutely adore swifts. And you hear them screaming over villages, around churches, anywhere with old buildings. When I gave birth to my child, it was in September and there was a big flock of swifts about to leave from a big colony. So I will always associate that wonderful noise and the behavior of those swifts with her being born, which is fantastic. And they're just so fast and so loud and so obnoxious. They are marvelous creatures. You then get all kinds of different dragonflies. So again, like you think, yeah, we're just a few dragonflies. Nope, there's loads of different species that you can look at. You're looking at what color the center of the body is. You're looking at any spots on the wings. You're looking at the size, the habitat, and so on. Badgers, really hard to see, actually. I think they're getting harder as well. Um, but if you're lucky, you might see one scurrying down the road. Another thing to look out for, though, if you do want to connect with mammals like badgers, pine martens, and so on, it's worth looking at events going on with a local wildlife trust or the RSPB and so on. A lot of them do have feeding stations and hides where you can go and take photographs. And as long as you've got well-behaved kids, they'll be quite quiet. They can go on quite late at night. Um, but they'll put things like peanut butter and eggs out to draw them in. So it's worth checking those out if you do want to see those more kind of spectacular mammals. This particular owl is a short-eared owl that crash landed when I was living on the Isles of Scilly and I had to go and collect it for rehabilitation because it was injured. And the angry look in its eyes was definitely the way it was behaving as well. Yeah, one piece of advice is don't pick up an injured owl unless you have very thick gloves on. They don't like it. But owls are a really fun way to connect with nature. You hear them quite easily. So you hear tawny owls. You might see a ghostly barn owl flying over the fields. And then you get short-eared owls, long-eared owls, and little owls, which are actually introduced but still marvelous. And they really are very dinky. And they are essentially one of the most charismatic bird species we have. We always say if you're going to connect people with nature using a bird, an owl is the best way to do it. And it's all down to psychology. Owls have their eyes pointing forward, which means that you can make eye contact with them in the same way you can with a lot of mammals. And that means that we are more likely to connect with it. It also means we're more likely to do things like give money and so on. So if you see an organization using an owl as a marketing thing, it usually has a reason behind it. And then I've already mentioned seals as well. So if you are on the coast, always have a look out for seals. They're a really good thing to go and see in November, December when you get the young out as well. Especially places like Donnanook in Lincolnshire or down the Suffolk coast and so on. You get these gorgeous little furry babies, which are just the sweetest things. They have these beautiful white coats for 2 to 4 weeks and are always worth taking kids to see because they will fall in love with them. Then we have some of the slightly less mainstream stuff, shall we say? So the hoverfly that you can see here is actually a hornet hoverfly. It's almost the size of a hornet, but it's actually not got a stinger. You can see it's got a very rounded bum, but this clever insect disguises itself as a hornet as a protection mechanism, and they really are quite enormous, about the size of your little finger, when you get a really big one. These utterly bizarre looking creatures next to the hornet are goose barnacles, which I photographed on Silly. And they washed up from the depths on one of the beaches and they were still alive. They travel thousands of miles and have these long, very strange looking bodies. And these, if you were to open up one of those shells, almost like a little spider thing comes out of it. They're very bizarre looking and very strange. They're actually a delicacy in, I think, Portugal. If they wash up, they will actually eat them very happily. But to me, they just look a bit like disgusting jelly sweets that we give to kids to be quiet when they're watching films. But yeah, they're lucky enough to have seen them, and they are very cool. Again, checking the coastline, you never know what you're going to see on the coast. We have a little baby toadlet. Weirdly, one of my daughter's favorite animals. I'm not a massive fan of picking up toads and frogs and things because they can scream at you, which makes you jump. But my daughter loves it. She thinks they're great. And it's always worth looking at moths as well. A lot of people kind of give moths a bad reputation for being a bit grey and dull, but actually they are just as beautiful as butterflies, and in many cases more so. So I would highly recommend checking out moths either as part of a moth trap or even just leaving your bathroom window open in the summer. So what are we actually going to do? This is where we kind of get into those random acts of wildness. And like I said, I've written a book with 365 of them, but I've pulled out some of my favorites here to share with you the different things that people can do. Very first one in the book, and that I would always come back to, is about recording it. So starting your own wild diary. You can do that in loads of different ways. You can make notes on your phone or your iPad or tablet, just keeping notes on a calendar of what you've seen and when, or you can get more creative. So creating your own diary, getting kids to decorate it, making like a wall chart or something. And it can be about recording the individual species. It can be about recording the kinds of things you've done. If you're really going to get into the mindfulness of it, writing down the way that you felt during a nature experience is a really good way to actually improve your own mental health and reflect on how wildlife has made you feel. Those emotions are not always positive. It's really easy to say, oh yeah, make going outside makes you feel great. It does. But if you're looking for something specific and you don't get to see it, you might feel disappointed. You might have been stuck behind a really annoying driver on the way to a nature reserve, so you might feel frustrated. All those emotions are totally fine as well. It doesn't always have to be great. And I think that's something that we forget when we go into any kind of journaling. We have this pressure that everything has to be amazing because we're journaling. It doesn't. It doesn't have to be. Just be honest with yourself about how you're feeling if that's what you want to do. Some people choose to write poems, which I always thought was incredibly creative for people doing 365 days wild, writing a whole poem every day. And other people just drew themselves little pictures or used stickers. But the important thing was making it habitual every single day, as is the case with any kind of journaling. This has to be the first one. And conversely, on day 365, go back through that diary, see what you did, look at those little nature memories, and I think you'd be amazed at how many core memories you've unlocked just by having an experience with nature. The next top tip is using all of your senses. Like I've said, this is not just about what you want to see. You want to be connecting with nature through hearing. You want to be connecting with nature through feeling. You want to be connecting through nature with smelling, and ideally, you want to be connecting with it through taste as well, although that comes with all of the usual caveats of make sure you identify what you're eating. Unless you're with an expert, I wouldn't recommend mushrooms. I think there's a lot of danger zones with mushrooms. But we can all do basic things like looking for blackberries. Occasionally, you might find damsons. I made the mistakes. I don't know if anyone noticed last year with that summer that started so early. We got an amazing crop of sloes that year, and they got so big and so juicy. I accidentally mistook one for a plum and took a bite out of it, and I would not recommend taking a bite out of a sloe. It just sucks the moisture out of your mouth. But we live and learn. So yeah, always be careful with what you're eating, but making sure that you do experience nature in those different ways is really important. It isn't just about looking at things and ticking it off. It is far more about the touching, feeling, listening. My partner is like he has like a superpower for bird sounds and hearing. It is terrifying. He hears things from about 2 miles away. Um, but you don't always have to know what you're listening to. It's not just about the identification, it's about the experience. And at any opportunity, making sure that you're feeling different textures. So feeling mud, feeling water, feeling grass, feeling sand. Try and remove those barriers between you and your body and that natural experience as much as you can, and you will get more from the experience itself. I think how we're talking is really important. And I have been very conscious of this when out with my daughter and her friends. You can very easily slip into very negative words when it comes to talking about nature. So you say, "Oh, don't touch that; it's dirty." Um, don't touch. Oh, don't ignore those dandelions; they're weeds. It's very easy to have these negative connotations and negative framing. And the more we frame nature as negative, dirty, unsafe, etc., the more that positions all of nature like that. And then we end up with things that we like and things that we don't like. And that's not good. So rather than saying that something is dirty or saying, oh, go and wash your hands and all the rest of it, we just make it positive. Mud washes off, it's not a problem, or let's give that a wash. You can have wet wipes with you if you want. I carry like a little flannel with me and I just like push it in a puddle if I need to, all else fails. Because I try not to use wet wipes and so on. But trying to encourage kids not to worry about a bit of mud. Quite often I find the people you need to convince are actually their parents. Or the risk assessments. I have recently become embroiled in the joy of school risk assessments, and I cannot believe there are so many barriers to people having a nice time anywhere. That's the way it goes. So yeah, just look for fun and creative ways to reframe things. Weeds are never weeds. A weed is just a plant growing somewhere that we don't want it to grow. They're actually wildflowers and grasses and so on, so try to avoid any terminology that labels things negatively like that. If we say, oh, don't touch, actually, how can we experience it? Get your phone out and use the camera instead, rather than touching it and trying to pick it and feel it. Use your phone to look more closely. Use your phone to record it. There are different ways to experience things. If you're thinking, oh, that looks really fragile or really rare and so on, or I don't want my kid to touch that, think, how can they experience it instead? Don't pick things is a really obvious one. And it's something that all kids and even adults have the temptation to do. We see flowers and it's tempting to pick them and put them in a vase. And sometimes that's absolutely fine, to be honest. Um, but the way that I frame it with my kid is that we need to leave those for the bees to eat. We frame it as a source of food for the bees. And then actually, she now makes the choice that she doesn't want to pick it. She wants to leave it for the bees, and she feels virtuous, and I feel good. And yeah, we've basically reframed the act of picking it, and I encourage her to take photos. And another really obvious one I've heard lots of people say is, "Oh, don't touch it, you'll kill it." And it's just about teaching kids to be gentle and understanding how small things are. I went on a walk with the school, and we have a little girl who's got very high level of ADHD and autism. She's very hyperactive and quite clumsy when she's not paying attention. And none of the other teachers would allow her near this little ladybird that was on a stick. I was like, no, we can do this, we can handle it. And actually, by giving her the task of carrying the ladybird all the way back to school, we have not seen such transformation in this child. She was so connected to this little thing that was sitting on her hand and sitting on the stick. It completely calmed her down. She got to choose where we released it. She got to make sure that it was safe. And actually, tackling neurodiversity by allowing kids to experience nature is something that is really important. And if we just listened to the risk assessment, we wouldn't have let the kids anywhere near this ladybird. But as it was, no. And she was much calmer throughout the day, and it was a really good experience for her. So I'd always say reframing something and reframing a discussion is much better for connecting people with nature than by just simply putting a barrier up and saying that they can't. Quite often, that the people that we think are going to be the worst for nature are the ones who will benefit the most. So I'm a big proponent of getting kids with any kind of neurodiversity and adults with any kind of neurodiversity out into nature. I think we see the biggest benefits in those places, and they really, really care. This kid still talks to me about the experience she had with the ladybird, and that makes me really happy because that was about 18 months ago. And I love that that created such a core memory for her. One of my favorite things, so yeah, I'm an author. I love to write, and I love wild words. We have lost many wild words from the dictionary recently, even some quite basic ones. And there's big campaigns to kind of get wild words back into life. These are some of my favorites, though. So, apricity, which is the warmth of the sun in winter, which is something we've all needed in the past month because it has been so wet and horrible. Yaffle, which is the laugh of the green woodpecker and is onomatopoeic. Moonglade, the moonlight on water, again, something that's really easy to relate to. Gelid, icy, extremely cold. I was in Norway 10 days ago, and I have to say it was very gelid indeed. And this one that I can't say at all, which is onomatopoeic again, and is the wind rushing through the trees, which I just think is the most beautiful word, even if it is totally beyond my vocabulary. Say it. There's loads of different wild words, and it's quite fun depending on where you are in the country to find out what your regional ones are as well, because most places have regional nature words. So yeah, have a check out what yours are. I think Norfolk's got some really good ones, and Scotland's got some really good ones in Yorkshire. So have a look at those and see if there's any you can drop into conversation and confuse people with. One of the things that I have found very important is letting go of your inhibitions, no matter how old you are. We kind of reach an age where we become so self-conscious that we can't possibly go and have fun in nature anymore or have fun anywhere. Um, when you're connecting kids with nature, they are going to be led by your example, especially younger kids. So if you want your kid to be one of those kids that jumps in puddles, I'm afraid you've got to jump in the puddles too. Just recommend having decent footwear to do it in. But at the same time, like getting stuck in and inspiring kids with your own behavior is really going to help them. If you act like nature is bad, dirty, and off limits, they are also going to pick up on that. If you get stuck in, you help build that den, you get covered in mud, you run around a forest laughing, trying to find things that are different colors, you jump in puddles, you run out in the rain, your kids are also going to think that's okay as well. And I think that's really important to kind of get stuck into that. A few weeks ago, I had a big group of kids at my house. Goodness knows how, just kind of ended up like that. And essentially, yeah, I just let them all get bored and let them all go off and do what they wanted to do. And we ended up going on this lovely nature walk. And I made sure I stayed at the back. I gave them each a little tub to collect things in. Um, but making sure that I was the one that was okay with like getting stung and getting this. If as an adult you get stung by a stinging nettle, if a kid sees it happen, well, mum got stung. It's not that bad. Oh, gran got stung. It's not that bad. Um, but they do have a tendency to kind of panic if you panic. So being calm, getting stuck in, not making a big deal out of things going wrong, always going to help. Even if things happen like wellies get stuck in mud and they end up walking through them, clothes wash at the end of the day. All else fails, throw them away and get down the charity shop and get some more. It'll be fine. I've already touched on this a little bit, and it's all to do with mindfulness and wildfulness. And I think that's a really poignant and relevant topic that we could spend an hour discussing on its own at the moment. How you let nature guide your own mental health. I've already talked about journaling, but there's other things you can do as well. So like going out and meditating in nature, you can go to classes that have got yoga. You could also do things like get yoga teachers to come into your community groups and do those things outside for kids. Getting them to get really up close and personal to nature, so drawing things in real detail will take them out of their own heads and getting them to do things like that. And again, if you have got people in your lives who have neurodiversity and so on, or are suffering from mental health problems, nature really is a great grounder in those respects. And it can be really simple things like when you're running or so on, don't put the headphones on. Just listen to the birds, try and stay present, try and identify things as you're running along. And you'd be amazed at how much quicker that process goes and also how much more connected you feel to nature as a consequence. Identifying things is always a fun one, slightly controversial actually. There's been a lot of research that a lot of people can actually identify basic things now. And I totally get that. I couldn't when I was younger. I've had to actively go out and learn things from scratch. So I've seen about 425 bird species in the UK, but when I started birding, I wouldn't have been able to even name 200. So it doesn't matter when you start, it doesn't matter when you learn. Make the most of it and try and actually put names to things so that you are again being more mindful about and more conscious about what that species is. So this is a beautiful comma butterfly. We get those lovely big oxeye daisies in the spring. Loads of different fungi. This is the most commonly flageric. It's the most common like fairy tale one, if you like, and things like trees as well. I'm really rubbish at trees, but oaks are quite an easy one because of their leaf shape. But I openly admit I'm rubbish at identifying trees. I'm much better at whales and dolphins, which is a bit bizarre. But knowing what you're looking at can really open up a whole world of conversations with people. And it also helps you to protect things. It helps you to know it's not just a tree, it's an oak, it's not just a flower, it's an oxeye daisy, it's not just a butterfly, it's a comma. And it gives them their own special place and stops us from reducing these things down too far. Shop with nature in mind, always a good one. We all make a range of decisions with shopping, some good, some bad. I'm just as bad as anybody else. But trying to use things that are sustainable, always a good one. Shampoo and conditioner bars, always, they've become far more common. It used to just be Lush you could get them from, but you can get them from loads of shops now. Same with like washing products, cleaning products for yourself, even things like buying secondhand clothes. It's a little thing that you can help to do to help the environment around you, not put too much pressure. If you can avoid the big terrifying shops like Shein and Temu and so on, they really are the worst for the environment because they're just rolling out this fast fashion over and over again. Being aware of the kind of things you're buying and also aware of the kind of food you're buying, trying to shop as local as possible, trying to shop sustainably, and teaching your kids how to do that as well. That's always going to be helpful. Creativity is a huge part of it as well. I am not the best at creativity. I can draw reasonably well, but that's about where it ends. I've got friends who are so creative. They do crochet and embroidery and knitting, and they can make murals on the side of buildings within 5 minutes and they all look outstanding. But even just a simple thing like getting kids to go and collect different things from the garden and then make pictures in the garden, collecting things on the beach and creating like sandy sea monsters and so on. Or if they're feeling really creative, then yeah, you can go into the slightly more complicated mediums as well. The other thing to look at there, if people are doing crafts around you, is also what you can buy and support. If you're getting close to Christmas and you've got a friend who is crafting, is there a way you can use their products as presents and so on? So it doesn't always have to be you that's being creative. It can be other people and you supporting them as well. I did say there was some only for adults. Foraging probably should be done with an adult present who knows what they're looking at, but you can also do some really fun things with these things. So, for example, making blackberry vodka, always a good one. I mentioned sloes earlier. The sloes last year made the best sloe gin I've ever had in my life. They were really tart, really fresh, and really delicious. Um, so I do recommend having a look for sloes in around July, August time. I think they make really good sloe gin at that point. And you can also forage ingredients to make things like cocktails as well. So you can be a bit cheeky with it. It's not just for kids. Don't feel you have to always involve the kids in everything. If we want to go and make some alcoholic themed wine and so on, nature wine, we're allowed to do that too. I've already mentioned things like running. That's really important for me and my mental health. Running in nature settings much better for you than running on a treadmill or running around a pavement because you're going to be getting all of the benefits of soaking up a green space at the same time. If bikes are your thing more so, go and do that. But you can also do things like outside yoga classes and a lot of exercise classes, boot camps, and so on. They're putting those in green settings now. And that's actually quite distracting. I used to go to a kettlebells class on the Isles of Scilly, and I used to get terribly distracted listening to the birds and wondering what was flying around to the point that I had to start leaving my phone to one side, otherwise I would get overly distracted by what was going on. So yeah, making sure that you build in exercise into the wild environment, always very good for you. And again, great for kids as well. Even if it's just walking and so on, get them outside into those spaces and get them noticing the nature as they're moving. You can also do really big things. So murmurations are a really good one. Somerset at this time of year is particularly outstanding for them, although you do get them over towns and cities as well. So where literally millions of starlings will come together and create these huge spectacles. The one I really like doing though is driving up and down the motorway and counting the amount of kestrels you see hovering. This bird is actually sadly declining in the UK now quite drastically. But they are a really quite beautiful bird. And if you see them hovering at the side of the road, I think that's a little wildlife experience in itself as they're hunting. They really are very sweet, very pretty, and something that you get pretty much everywhere in the UK. Sharing it with friends is always better for your mental health. Some people get a lot of benefits from spending time on their own with nature, but one of the big benefits we saw through 30 Days Wild was actually that process of sharing with people around you. And I actually feel really buoyed up now when I go out into nature reserves and so on, seeing more and more young people out there using these places responsibly. I think it's great. Um, you see couples out there holding hands and walking along. You see people with their families out there, and provided we're all using those spaces respectfully and carefully, I think it's fantastic. And share those nature experiences with your friends as much as you can. Put it on social media, take people out with you, take it into your local community group. It can be anything little, it can be anything big, whatever you want and whatever connects you. Even if it's like, oh, rather than going for lunch with a friend, we're going to go for a walk instead. There's loads of different ways you can do it, and sharing it with friends is going to bring those benefits for your mental health as well as for nature. And it very much is your wildlife. Everyone's is different. No one's is the same. There is no right or wrong way, particularly, to do this. It's about treating nature respectfully, about putting nature first. Learn as much as you can, but make sure you do it in a way that is comfortable to you. Because the more rules we put in place, the less likely you are to do it. So I would advise everyone to go out and have a wildlife and make the most of nature on their doorstep.